The frozen winds of Titan 7 howled across the empty landscape like angry spirits. Ice crystals danced in the pale light of the distant sun, creating a world that looked more dead than alive. Agent Kyung-ho pulled his thermal suit tighter as he checked his scanner again. The readings were all wrong. "Haijin, are you seeing this?" He called through his radio. His partner crouched behind a ridge of ice 50 meters away. Agent Haijin had been with the Interstellar Security Initiative for 8 years, but she had never seen readings like these. "My scanner is going crazy too. This is not just a mining operation." They had come to Titan 7 following reports of illegal mining. Someone was stealing rare crystals from the moon without permission. It should have been a simple mission. Catch the miners, arrest them, and go home. But nothing about this felt simple anymore. Kyung-ho moved carefully across the ice. His boots crunched with each step. The sound seemed too loud in the endless silence. He had been an ISI agent for 12 years. He knew when something was wrong, and everything here felt wrong. There, Haijin pointed to a dark shape in the distance. "Something is buried under the ice." They approached slowly. The shape was too regular to be natural. As they got closer, they could see metal edges poking through the frozen surface. This was not a mining operation. This was a crash site. "How long has this been here?" Haijin asked. Kyung-ho ran his scanner over the buried object. According to these readings, maybe 100 years, maybe more. They began to dig. The ice was hard, but their tools were good. After an hour of work, they had cleared enough to see what lay beneath. It was a ship, but not like any ship they had seen before. The metal was dark and smooth. Strange symbols covered its surface. "This is alien technology," Haijin whispered. Kyung-ho nodded. In all his years with ISI, he had never seen an actual alien ship. Humans had met other species in space, but finding a crashed ship was rare. Very rare. They found an opening in the side of the ship. The metal had been torn apart, probably during the crash. Inside, emergency lights still flickered weakly. Somehow the ship still had power after all these years. The interior was small and cramped. Everything was built for beings much smaller than humans. Kyung-ho had to duck his head as he moved through the narrow corridors. The walls were covered with more strange symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. "Over here," Haijin called. She was standing in front of a small room. Inside was a single pod, about the size of a coffin. It was made of the same dark metal as the ship, but it was different somehow. This metal was not torn or damaged. It looked perfect. "Is that what I think it is?" Kyung-ho asked. "A cryogenic pod," Haijin confirmed. "Someone is inside." They looked at each other. Finding an alien ship was one thing. Finding someone alive inside it was something else entirely. Something that would change everything. Haijin ran her scanner over the pod. "Life signs are weak but steady. Whoever is in there is still alive." Kyung-ho studied the pod's surface. There were controls, but they were labeled in the alien language. "Can you figure out how to open it?" "I think so." Haijin was good with technology. She had always been good with machines, even alien ones. These symbols looked like they might be instructions. She pressed a series of buttons on the pod surface. Nothing happened at first. Then, with a soft hiss, the pod began to open. White vapor poured out as the cold air inside mixed with the ship's atmosphere. Inside the pod lay a small figure. It was clearly not human, but it was also clearly a child. The being had pale blue skin and large eyes that were closed in sleep or unconsciousness. It was tiny, maybe the size of a human 5-year-old. "Oh my God," Haijin breathed. The child's body was covered in what looked like injuries. Old scars marked her arms and legs. She was too thin, like she had not eaten properly in a long time. Someone had hurt this child. Someone had hurt her badly. Kyung-ho felt something twist in his chest. He had seen many terrible things in his years as an agent, but nothing had prepared him for this. This was just a child who had been alone and frozen for who knows how long. "We need to get her out of here," he said. "Are you sure that's safe?" Haijin asked. "We don't know anything about her biology. Moving her could hurt her." "Look at her," Kyung-ho said. "She's already hurt. She's been hurt for a long time. If we leave her here, she'll die." Haijin looked at the child again. The little being's breathing was shallow and weak. Her skin was cold to the touch. "You're right, we can't leave her." They carefully lifted the child from the pod. She was lighter than they expected, as if her bones were hollow like a bird's. Kyung-ho wrapped her in his thermal blanket while Haijin gathered what medical supplies they had. "What do you think happened here?" Haijin asked. As they prepared to leave the ship, Kyung-ho looked around the damaged vessel. "I think someone was running. Someone was trying to escape, and they put this child in that pod to keep her safe. But, from what I don't know, but whatever it was bad enough that they were willing to crash on this frozen moon rather than face it." They carried the child back to their own ship. As they walked across the ice, Kyung-ho could not stop thinking about what they had found. This was not just a rescue mission anymore. This was something much bigger. Something that could change how humans understood their place in the galaxy. The child stirred in his arms as they reached their ship. Her large eyes opened and looked up at him. They were the color of deep water and they were filled with fear. "It's okay," Kyung-ho said softly. "You're safe now." He did not know if she could understand him, but something in his voice seemed to calm her. The fear in her eyes faded just a little. For the first time in who knows how long, this child was not alone. As their ship lifted off from Titan 7, made a decision. Whatever had happened to this child, whatever had forced her people to hide her in that frozen tomb, it was not going to happen again. Not while he was alive to stop it. The child had been alone for too long, but she was not alone anymore. The medical bay of their ship hummed quietly as Hyjin worked over the alien child. 3 days had passed since they found her on Titan 7, and she was finally beginning to wake up properly. Her breathing was stronger now, and some color had returned to her pale blue skin. Kyung-ho sat in the chair beside the medical bed, watching the child sleep. He had barely left her side since they brought her aboard. Something about her reminded him of himself when he was young and alone. He understood what it felt like to have no one in the world who cared. Her vital signs are getting better, Hyjin said, checking the medical scanner. But I'm worried about these old injuries. Someone hurt her badly, and more than once. The child's arms and legs were covered in scars. Some looked like burns. Others looked like cuts that had healed badly. Kyung-ho's hands clenched into fists when he thought about what she must have suffered. We should have reported this to headquarters by now, Hyjin said quietly. I know, Kyung-ho replied. But something tells me we need to understand what happened first. The child's eyes opened slowly. They were large and blue-green, like deep ocean water. She looked around the medical bay with confusion and fear. When she saw Kyung-ho and Hyjin, she tried to sit up quickly, but she was too weak. Easy, Kyung-ho said softly. You're safe. No one is going to hurt you. The child stared at him. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no sound came out. Instead, something strange happened. Images began to flash through Kyung-ho's mind. Pictures that were not his own memories. He saw a beautiful world with purple skies and silver cities. He saw people who looked like the child, with pale blue skin and large eyes. They were peaceful people who lived in harmony with nature. Then the images changed. He saw dark ships filling the sky. He saw fire and destruction. He saw the child's people being taken away in chains. Did you see that too? Hyjin asked, her voice shaking. You saw it. The images, the destruction. She's showing us what happened to her people. The child looked at them with surprise. She had not expected them to understand. She touched her forehead and then pointed to theirs, trying to explain. She's telepathic, Hyjin realized. She can share thoughts and memories. More images flowed from the child's mind. They saw her parents, kind beings who loved her deeply. They saw the attack on their ship. They saw her father programming the cryogenic pod while her mother held her close, tears streaming down her face. They saw her parents being killed by creatures in dark armor. The child began to cry, silent tears. Kyung-ho reached out carefully and took her small hand in his. We understand, he said. We know what happened, and we're going to help you. For the first time, the child did not pull away from a touch. Something in Kyung-ho's voice, something in his eyes, told her that he meant what he said. Over the next few hours they learned more about her through the shared images. Her people were called the Villani. They were traders and explorers who traveled between worlds peacefully. They had been attacked by something called the hegemony, a group that captured other species to use as slaves. The Villani had tried to escape, but their ship was damaged. Her parents had hidden her in the cryogenic pod, hoping someone would find her and keep her safe. The pod was programmed to keep her alive for as long as possible, waiting for rescue. She's been alone for over a century, Hyjin said. Can you imagine? Kyung-ho could imagine. He had spent his childhood moving from one foster home to another, never knowing if he was wanted or safe. But at least he had not been alone for 100 years. They decided to give her a name. Through the mental connection, they offered her different options. When they thought of the Korean name Nari, which meant lily, she seemed to like it. Lilies were flowers that grew in difficult places but remained beautiful. It seemed perfect for her. Nari began to trust them more each day. She learned to understand their language quickly. Though she still preferred to communicate through shared thoughts and images, she showed them more about her people's culture and their advanced technology. The Villani had not been warriors. They had been peaceful, preferring to explore and learn rather than fight. But they had possessed incredible knowledge about living in harmony with their environment. They could communicate with plants and animals, and they understood the connections between all living things. No wonder the hegemony wanted them as slaves, Hyjin said. Imagine what you could do with people who understand life itself. As Nari grew stronger, she began to explore their ship. She was curious about everything, especially their technology. She seemed to understand how their machines worked just by touching them. When she placed her hand on their navigation computer, she was able to show them the location of dozens of worlds they had never heard of. But with each passing day, Kyung-ho and Hyjin faced a growing problem. They were supposed to report to ISI headquarters. Their mission to Titan 7 was officially over, and they were expected to return to Earth. But how could they explain Nari? How could they make their superiors understand what they had found? If we report her, they'll want to study her, Hyjin said, to become a specimen in a laboratory. Or a political tool, Kyung-ho added. The government will want to use her knowledge for military purposes. They both knew what would happen. Nari would be taken away from them and locked in some facility, where scientists would run tests on her. She would be alone again, just in a different kind of prison. We can't let that happen, Kyung-ho said. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we disappear for a while, just until we can figure out a better way to handle this. Haijin stared at him. You're talking about going rogue, about disobeying direct orders. I'm talking about protecting a child who has already suffered too much. That night, as Nari slept peacefully for the first time in over a century, Kyung-ho and Haijin made their decision. They would not report her to headquarters, not yet. Instead, they would find a safe place where she could recover and learn about the galaxy as it was now. They began to plan their disappearance carefully. They would need new identities and a place to hide. Most importantly, they would need to make sure Nari was safe from both the ISI and the hegemony forces that might still be looking for her. As Kyung-ho watched Nari sleep, he realized that somewhere in the past week she had become more than just a rescue mission to him. She had become family, and he would do whatever it took to protect his family. 6 weeks had passed since Kyung-ho and Haijin had gone off the grid. They had found a small house on New Haven, a quiet colony world at the edge of human space. The house sat on a hill overlooking green fields and a peaceful river. It was the kind of place where people minded their own business and asked few questions. Nari was growing stronger every day. Her pale blue skin now had a healthy glow, and she had gained weight. More importantly, the fear that had lived in her eyes was slowly disappearing. She laughed now, a sound like silver bells that filled the house with joy. Look, Kyung-ho, she called out in Korean, which she had learned to speak perfectly. The flowers are talking to me. She was sitting in the garden behind the house, surrounded by blooming roses. As she touched each flower, it seemed to bloom brighter and fuller. Her telepathic abilities allowed her to sense the life force in all living things. Kyung-ho smiled as he watched her. In the past month, he had seen her change from a frightened, broken child into someone who was beginning to heal. But he had changed her for the first time in his life. He understood what it meant to be a father. She's getting stronger, Haijin said, joining him on the porch. Her abilities are developing faster than I expected. Is that good or bad? I don't know. The stronger she gets, the easier it will be for the wrong people to find her. They had been careful to stay hidden, but they both knew it was only a matter of time. The ISI was looking for them, and if the hegemony was still active, they might be looking for Nari too. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Nari asked the question they had been dreading. Why can't we go back to your people, she asked. Why do we have to hide? Kyung-ho and Haijin looked at each other. They had been putting off this conversation, but Nari was too smart to be fooled much longer. It's complicated, Haijin said, carefully. Are you in trouble because of me? The sadness in her voice broke Kyung-ho's heart. She was still just a child, but she had been through so much that she always expected to be a burden to others. You are not the problem, Kyung-ho said firmly. You are the best thing that has ever happened to us. Then why? Kyung-ho took a deep breath. It was time to tell her the truth. Because some people would want to hurt you, not because you're bad, but because you're special. They would want to use your abilities for their own purposes, like the hegemony did to my people. Yes, like that. Nari was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and took both of their hands in hers. Through the telepathic connection, she shared her feelings with them. Love, gratitude, and something else. The feeling of finally belonging somewhere. You saved me, she said softly. You gave me a family again. That night, after Nari had gone to bed, Kyung-ho and Haijin sat on the porch and talked about their situation. They had been running for weeks, but they couldn't run forever. We need to make a decision, Haijin said. We can't keep her hidden forever, I know. But every option seems to end with her being taken away from us. Haijin was quiet for a while. Then she said, I need to tell you something. About why this matters so much to me. Kyung-ho waited. I've wanted a family my whole life. She continued. I've wanted children, but I can't have them. When I saw Nari in that pod, when I saw how alone and hurt she was, something inside me just knew. She needed us, and we needed her. I understand, Kyung-ho said. I grew up in the system. Foster homes, government facilities, always moving from place to place. I never had a real family until now. So what do we do? Before Kyung-ho could answer, Nari appeared in the doorway. She was supposed to be asleep, but her telepathic abilities made it hard for her to ignore strong emotions. I heard your thoughts, she said quietly. You're worried about me. We're worried about all of us, Haijin said, pulling Nari onto her lap. We want to keep you safe, but we also want to do the right thing. What if we didn't have to choose? Nari asked. What do you mean? What if there was a way to stop the hegemony? What if we could make sure they never hurt anyone else the way they hurt my people? Kyung-ho and Haijin exchanged glances. That's a big task for 3 people, Kyung-ho said. But we're not just 3 people, Nari said. We're family, and families protect each other. The next morning, their peaceful life was interrupted by an emergency alert on their communication system. It was from ISI headquarters, and it was addressed to all agents. Priority alert, the message said. Agents Kyung-ho and Haijin are to be considered missing and potentially compromised. Any agent who encounters them should report their location. Immediately, they're really looking for us, Haijin said. It gets worse, Kyung-ho said, reading the rest of the message. They're offering a reward for information leading to our capture. Nari looked worried. What does this mean? It means we need to be even more careful, Kyung-ho said. But it also means we need to make a choice soon. That afternoon, while Nari was playing in the garden, a stranger approached the house. He was tall and thin, with the kind of eyes that missed nothing. Kyung-ho recognized the type immediately. Government agent. Can I help you? Kyung-ho asked, keeping his voice casual. I'm looking for some friends of mine, the man said, 2 ISI agents who might be in the area. Have you seen anyone matching their description? Can't say I have, Kyung-ho replied. This is a quiet neighborhood. We don't get many visitors. The man nodded, but his eyes were already scanning the property. Nice place you have here, family. My wife and daughter. Your daughter has an interesting look about her. Is she adopted? Kyung-ho's blood ran cold. This man had seen Nari. I don't see how that's any of your business. Of course not. Just making conversation. The man handed Kyung-ho a card. If you see anything unusual, please give me a call. After the man left, Kyung-ho found Hyejin and Nari inside the house. We need to leave, he said. Now what happened? Hyejin asked. Someone's been asking questions about us, about Nari specifically. They packed quickly, taking only what they needed. As they loaded their belongings into their ship, Nari looked back at the house, sadly. I liked it here, she said. I know, Hyejin said, hugging her close, but home isn't a place. Home is being together. As their ship lifted off from New Haven, Kyung-ho realized that their time of hiding was over. Whether they wanted it or not, they were about to face whatever came next. But they would face it together, as a family. In the distance, other ships were already moving to intercept them. The chase was about to begin. The command deck of the Hegemony warship destroyer was dark except for the glow of tactical displays. Commander Vextar stood before the main screen, his red eyes studying the star charts. His race, the Kree, were known throughout the galaxy as ruthless hunters, and right now, he was hunting something very valuable. Report, he commanded his lieutenant. The energy signature appeared briefly in the outer rim. Sir, Sector 7 Delta, it matches the psychic pattern we've been tracking. Vextar's mouth twisted into what might have been a smile. After all these years, the little Vellani is still alive. Orders, sir. Set course for the human territories. It's time to collect what belongs to us. The Vellani had been one of the Hegemony's most prized conquests. Their telepathic abilities made them perfect for controlling other slaves, and their deep connection to life itself made them valuable in ways most species could not understand. When the last Vellani transport, the ship had been destroyed over a century ago, Vextar had assumed the bloodline was extinct, but the energy readings didn't lie. Somewhere in human space, a Vellani child was not only alive but growing stronger. And if she was anything like her ancestors, she would be worth an entire army of lesser slaves, far away. On Earth, ISI Director Kim paced in his office. 2 of his best agents had disappeared months ago, and now there were reports of unusual energy readings in the same sectors where they had been seen. Something was very wrong. Sir, his aide entered the office. We've received a priority transmission from Agent Park. He's requesting immediate backup. Director Kim looked up. Agent Park was the one tracking Kyung-ho and Hyejin. If he was calling for backup, it meant he had found them. Where are they? New Haven Colony, sir. But there's something else. Agent Park reports that they're traveling with a third person, a child who doesn't appear in any human databases. Director Kim frowned. This was getting more complicated by the hour. Send a full squad to New Haven. I want them brought in alive. All 3 of them, sir. All 3. Meanwhile, aboard their ship fleeing from New Haven, Nari sat in the co-pilot's seat with her eyes closed. She had been quiet since they left the planet, and Kyung-ho was worried about her. What is it? He asked gently. I can feel them, Nari, said her voice small and frightened. The hunters. They're coming. Who's coming? The ones who killed my family, the Hegemony. Nari opened her eyes, and they were filled with tears. They know I'm alive. They've been looking for me. Hyejin turned from the navigation console. How can you sense them across space? My people, we're connected to the life force of the universe. When someone wants to hurt us, we can feel their intention like a cold wind. Nari shivered, and they want to hurt me very badly. Kyung-ho checked their ship's sensors. There were no other vessels nearby. But if Nari could sense the Hegemony forces, they were probably closer than his instruments could detect. We need somewhere safe to hide, he said. There is no safe place, Nari replied. Not as long as they exist. Over the next few hours, Nari began to share more memories with them. But these were not her own memories. They were genetic memories, passed down through generations of her people. They showed the true history of the Hegemony and their crimes across the galaxy. The images were horrible. Entire worlds enslaved, species driven to extinction. Children taken from their families and trained to be weapons. The Hegemony had been spreading across the galaxy like a plague for thousands of years. They don't just want slaves, Nari explained. They want to control everything that lives. My people were special because we could communicate with all life. The Hegemony wanted to use us to control entire ecosystems. But why are they still looking for you after all this time? Because I'm the last one. And because I'm different from the others. Different how? Nari hesitated. My parents were both from ancient bloodlines. When they had me, something new was created. I'm not just telepathic. I can do things that even other Villani couldn't do. As if to demonstrate, Nari placed her hand on the ship's control panel. Immediately, all the systems began working more efficiently. The engines hummed more smoothly. The life support system began recycling air more effectively. Even the lights seemed to burn brighter. You're enhancing our technology, Hyjin breathed. I can talk to machines the same way I talk to living things. Everything has a kind of consciousness, even if it's very simple. Kyung-ho realized what this meant. If the hegemony gets their hands on you, they could use your abilities to control not just people and animals but entire technological civilizations. That's why we can't let them catch me, Nari said. But I'm getting stronger every day. Soon I won't be able to hide my abilities anymore. Their conversation was interrupted by an alarm. 3 ships had just dropped out of hyperspace behind them. The ships were sleek and dark, unlike anything in the human fleet. Hegemony warships, Nari said, her face pale with fear. How did they find us so fast? Hyjin asked. They must have been tracking the psychic energy I've been giving off. Every time I use my abilities, I send out signals that they can follow. The lead hegemony ship was hailing them. Against his better judgment, Kyung-ho answered. The face that appeared on their screen was nightmare fuel. Vextar's red eyes burned with cruel intelligence, and his smile showed teeth like razors. Human vessel, he said in accented but perfect standard. You have something that belongs to the hegemony. Return the Villani child, and we will allow you to live. She doesn't belong to anyone, Kyung-ho replied. She's a free being. Vextar laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Freedom is an illusion. Human, everything in this galaxy belongs to the strong, and we are stronger than you. We'll see about that. Kyung-ho cut the communication and turned to Hyjin. Can you plot a course to the nearest ISI station? That's 3 hours away at maximum speed. Then we better get moving. As their ship accelerated, the hegemony vessels gave chase. Their ships were faster, but Kyung-ho was a skilled pilot. He began weaving through an asteroid field, using the large rocks as cover. They're gaining on us, Hyjin reported. I know. Suddenly, Nari stood up from her seat. Stop running, she said. What? Stop running. I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of hiding. Her eyes began to glow with a soft blue light. It's time to fight back. Nari, you're just a child. No, she said, and her voice carried a power that made the ship's hull vibrate. I am the last of the Villani. I carry the memory and strength of my entire people, and I will not let these monsters hurt anyone else. The glow around Nari grew brighter. Outside their ship, the asteroid field began to move. Massive rocks that had been floating in space for millions of years suddenly shifted, forming a barrier between their ship and the hegemony vessels. Impossible, Vextar's voice crackled over the radio. The child is too young to have such power. You underestimated her, Kyung-ho replied. And you underestimated us. But even as he spoke, he knew this was just the beginning. The hegemony had found them, and they would not give up easily. The real battle was about to begin. In the distance, more hegemony ships were jumping out of hyperspace, and somewhere behind them IZ vessels were also converging on their location. They were about to be caught between 2 forces, both of which wanted to take Nari away from them. But as Kyung-ho looked at the determination in the young alien's glowing eyes, he realized that neither side understood what they were dealing with. Nari was no longer the frightened child they had found on Titan 7. She was becoming something else entirely. Something powerful enough to change the balance of power in the galaxy. The question was, would that change be for better or worse? The asteroid field had become a battlefield. Hegemony warships weaved between the floating rocks while ISI vessels approached from the opposite direction. In the middle, Kyung-ho's small ship hung in space like a leaf caught between 2 storms, where it trapped, Hyjin said, watching the tactical display. Hegemony ships on one side, ISI fleet on the other. Nari stood at the center of the ship's bridge, her small form glowing with blue energy. The asteroids around them continued to move according to her will, but the effort was taking its toll. Sweat beaded on her pale forehead. I can't hold them back much longer, she said. There are too many ships. Commander Vextar's voice crackled over the communication system. Clever trick, little Villani, but you cannot fight an entire fleet. Surrender now, and I promise your human pets will die quickly. Never, Nari replied, her voice carrying across all frequencies without using the radio. Her telepathic abilities were broadcasting her words directly into the minds of everyone within range. On the ISI flagship, Director Kim stood on the bridge watching the impossible scene unfold. He had come here to arrest 2 rogue agents, but what he found was something that could change the course of galactic history. Sir, his communications officer said, we're receiving a transmission from Agent Kyung-ho. Put it through. Kyung-ho's face appeared on the main screen. Behind him, Kim could see the alien child, still glowing with power. Director Kim said, I know you came here to arrest us, but there's something bigger happening here. The hegemony has been committing genocide across the galaxy and they're here to capture this child. Explain. Quickly. Her name is Nari. She's the last of her people, the Villani. The hegemony enslaved and murdered her entire species over a century ago. She's been in cryogenic sleep until we found her. Kim studied the child on the screen. Even through the transmission, he could sense the power radiating from her. What are her abilities? She's telepathic, but more than that, she can communicate with all forms of life, including technology. If the hegemony captures her, they'll use her abilities to enslave entire civilizations. And if we take her into custody, Kyung-ho's expression hardened. She's not a weapon to be used. Director, she's a child who's already suffered too much. Before Kim could respond, alarms began blaring on both ships. The hegemony fleet was attacking. Energy beams lanced through space, striking the asteroids that Nari was using as shields. The massive rocks exploded into fragments, and the protective barrier began to crumble. Hyjin called out as the ship shook from nearby explosions. The child's glow intensified. Around their ship, the debris from the shattered asteroids began to swirl in complex patterns. What had been random chunks of rock suddenly became a coordinated defense system, intercepting enemy fire with impossible precision. But the effort was draining her. Blood began to trickle from her nose, and her small body trembled with exhaustion. I have to do more, she gasped. I have to stop them permanently. No, Kyung-ho said, kneeling beside her. You don't have to carry this burden alone, but I'm the only one who can fight them. You're wrong, came a new voice over the radio. It was directed to Kim ISI vessels. Target the hegemony ships. Protect the child. The space around them erupted into chaos as human and alien weapons lit up the darkness. ISI ships engaged the hegemony fleet in a desperate battle, but they were outgunned and outnumbered. Director Kyung-ho said over the radio, "Why are you helping us?" "Because I've seen the evidence," Kim replied. "The energy signatures, the technology, the genetic scans we took from Titan 7, everything confirms your story. And because if what you're saying about the hegemony is true, then stopping them is more important than following regulations." Commander, Vexter's flagship broke through the ISI defensive line, heading straight for Kyung-ho's ship. Its weapons charged, preparing to disable their engines and capture Nari alive. "Incoming," Hyjin shouted. The energy beam struck their ship, but instead of disabling them, something incredible happened. The beam was absorbed into their hull and redirected back at the attacker. Nari had somehow turned their entire ship into a living, the extension of her abilities. "Impossible," Vextar snarled. "No Villani has ever possessed such power." "That's because no Villani has ever been this angry," Nari replied, her mental voice reaching every mind in the battle. "You killed my family. You enslaved my people. You hunt children across the galaxy. But it ends today." The glow around Nari became blindingly bright. Every piece of technology within 100 kilometers began to resonate with her consciousness. ISI ships found their weapons firing more accurately and their shields holding stronger. But the hegemony vessels began to malfunction as Nari turned their own systems against them. "She's taking control of their ships." Hyjin breathed in amazement. One by one, the hegemony warships began to shut down. Their weapons stopped firing. Their engines went offline. Their life support systems began to fail. "No," Vextar screamed over the radio. "I will not be defeated by a child." His flagship broke free from Nari's control through sheer force of will. The ship accelerated directly toward them, intending to ram their vessel and destroy them all rather than face defeat. But Kyung-ho had been waiting for this moment. As the enemy ship approached, he fired every weapon their small vessel possessed. The concentrated firepower struck Vextar's ship just as Nari's abilities overwhelmed its defensive systems. The hegemony flagship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, taking its crew and their cruel commander with it. In the aftermath of the battle, space fell silent except for the hum of surviving ships' engines. The remaining hegemony vessels, now powerless and drifting, were quickly surrounded by ISI forces. Nari collapsed from exhaustion, the blue glow fading from her skin. Kyung-ho caught her before she hit the deck. "Is it over?" she whispered. "This part is," he replied gently. "But you did something incredible today. You didn't just save us, you saved everyone. Those monsters would have hurt in the future." Director Kim's voice came over the radio. "All vessels, stand down. Kyung-ho, Hyjin, prepare to be boarded. We need to talk." An hour later, Director Kim stood in their small ship's meeting room, looking at the three people who had just changed the course of galactic history. Nari sat between Kyung-ho and Hyjin, still weak but alert. "What you've done here today goes far beyond IC authority," Kim said. "This is going to reach the highest levels of human government, probably the Galactic Council as well." "What happens to Nari?" Hyjin asked. Kim was quiet for a moment. "Officially, I should place her in protective custody while the politicians decide what to do with her. And unofficially," Kim smiled slightly. "Unofficially, I think a child who just saved the galaxy from an ancient evil probably has the right to choose her own family." He looked at Nari. "What do you want, child?" Nari looked up at Kyung-ho and Hyjin, then back at Kim. "I want to stay with them. They saved me when no one else would. They protected me when it was dangerous. They're my family now. Then, as far as ICI is concerned, your agent Kyung-ho's adopted daughter, but there will be conditions." What kind of conditions? Kyung Ho asked. You'll work with us to hunt down the remaining hegemony cells. Nari's abilities and knowledge will be invaluable in stopping their other operations. But you'll do it as a family, not as prisoner and guards. Nari squeezed Kyung Ho's hand. I want to help. I want to make sure what happened to my people never happens to anyone else. As Kim prepared to leave, he turned back to them one more time. You know, when I first heard that 2 of my agents had gone rogue, I was angry. I thought you had forgotten your duty, but now I understand. Sometimes the greatest duty is to do what's right, even when it's not what you're ordered to do. Later, as they traveled back toward human space, Nari sat between her adoptive parents and watched the stars go by. For the first time in over a century, she felt truly safe. What happens next? She asked. Next, Kyung Ho said, we go home. We build a life together, and when you're ready, we help make sure the galaxy is safe for all children, no matter what species they are. Nari smiled, and in that smile was the promise of a better future for everyone. 5 years had passed since the battle in the asteroid field. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council on Unity Station buzzed with quiet conversation as representatives from dozens of species took their seats. Today was a historic day, and everyone knew it. Nari Park stood at the speaker's podium. No longer the frightened child found frozen on Titan 7 at 15. She had grown into a confident young woman, though she still retained the pale blue skin and large eyes of her people. She wore a simple blue dress that honored her Valani heritage, along with a small pin showing the Korean flag that represented her adopted home. In the front row, Kyung Ho and Haejin watched with pride. Kyung Ho now wore the uniform of an ISI section chief, while Haejin had her commander's insignia. Their work hunting down hegemony cells had earned them both promotions and respect throughout human space. Honored delegates, Nari began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. My name is Nari Park. I am the last of the Valani, and I speak today not just for my extinct people, but for all species who have suffered under oppression. Her words were translated into dozens of languages, but many delegates found themselves understanding her directly through the gentle telepathic connection she maintained. 5 years ago, my adoptive parents found me frozen and alone, the sole survivor of a genocide that claimed my entire species. Today, I stand before you as proof that even the darkest night can give way to dawn. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. The hegemony believed that strength came from conquest, that the strong had the right to enslave the weak, but they were wrong. True strength comes from protection, from choosing to stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. She paused, looking directly at the human delegation. The humans who found me could have turned me over to their government as a curiosity to be studied. They could have used my abilities for their own gain. Instead, they chose to love me as their own child. They chose to risk everything to keep me safe. Murmurs of appreciation rippled through the crowd. This is why I am proud to propose the creation of the Sanctuary Worlds Initiative. These will be planets dedicated to protecting refugee species, places where survivors of genocide can rebuild their lives in safety. Worlds where children like I once was will never have to face the darkness alone. The Altarian ambassador raised a tentacle. The costs of such an undertaking would be enormous. How do you propose we fund these sanctuary worlds? Nari smiled. The same way the humans funded my rescue. Through compassion, determination, and the understanding that protecting the innocent is not a cost but an investment in our collective future. She gestured, and a holographic display appeared above the podium showing detailed plans for the first sanctuary world. New Harmony will be located in the Kepler system, far from any contested territories. It will be defended by a joint fleet from all council species and governed by a council of refugees themselves. What about security? Asked the Centauri representative. How do we prevent these worlds from becoming targets? The same way my family protected me, Nari replied. By working together, by sharing information and resources, by remembering that an attack on the innocent is an attack on all of us. The session continued for hours as delegates asked questions and debated details, but by the end of the day, the vote was unanimous. The Sanctuary Worlds Initiative would become reality. After the session ended, Nari walked through the corridors of Unity Station with her parents. They passed viewports showing the vast starfield beyond, countless worlds where countless species were building their futures. I'm proud of you, Kyung Ho said, putting his arm around her shoulders. Your parents would be proud too. I hope so, Nari replied, but I couldn't have done any of this without you and Haejin. You taught me that family isn't about blood or species, it's about choosing to care for each other. They stopped at a memorial wall dedicated to victims of the hegemony's crimes. Nari placed her hand on the section honoring the Valani people, and for a moment, the names seemed to glow with soft blue light. I won't let them be forgotten, she whispered. They won't be, Haejin said. Every life saved by the Sanctuary Worlds will be a testament to their memory. Later that evening, in their quarters aboard the station, the family sat together for dinner as they had done countless times before. It was a simple meal, but it represented something profound. A human man, a human woman, and an alien child who had chosen to become something more than their origins. Director Kim wants to know if you're interested in joining ISI when you turn 18. Kung Ho said casually. Nar. I considered this maybe, but I think I want to be a diplomat first. There are still hegemony cells out there, still species that need help. I want to make sure they get it. Whatever you choose, Hyjin said, we'll support you. I know, Nari smiled. That's what families do. As the evening progressed, they talked about ordinary things. Neris studies, Kyung Ho's latest mission reports, Hyjin's plans for vacation. The conversation of a normal family living a normal life, but outside their window. The first ships were already departing for the Kepler system to begin construction of New Harmony. Across the galaxy, refugee species were receiving news that safe haven was finally available. And in the shadows, the remaining hegemony cells were realizing that their reign of terror was coming to an end. Later, as Nari prepared for bed, she stood at her window looking out at the stars. Through her telepathic abilities, she could sense the life on thousands of worlds. Some were suffering, some were struggling, but many were thriving. And tomorrow, because of what they had accomplished today, a few more would have hope. Good night, Mom. Good night, Dad. She called to her parents. Good night, sweetheart, they replied together. As she settled into sleep, Nara's mind reached out across space one more time. Somewhere out there, other children might be hiding in the darkness, waiting for rescue. Other families might be torn apart by forces beyond their control. Other species might be facing extinction, but they would not face it alone. The galaxy had learned something important from the story of a frozen alien child and the humans who chose to save her. It had learned that the greatest strength was not in weapons or technology, but in the simple decision to care for one another, and that lesson would echo across the stars for generations to come. In a small apartment on New Sol Colony, an elderly woman read the news reports about the Sanctuary World's initiative to her grandchildren. Remember this story, she told them. Remember that heroes don't always carry weapons or wear uniforms. Sometimes they're just people who choose to do the right thing when it matters most. On the bridge of an exploration vessel at the edge of known space, a captain received new orders. Proceed to Grid 7 Alpha. Reports of a distress signal. Could be refugees. The captain smiled. 5 years ago, such a mission might have been considered too risky. Now it was considered essential. And in the growing construction sites around New Harmony, workers from a dozen different species labored side by side to build something that had never existed before. A place where being different was not dangerous. Where being vulnerable did not mean being alone. Where children could grow up safely regardless of what world they came from. The frozen child from Titan 7 was frozen no longer. She had become the spark that lit a fire of hope across the galaxy, and that fire would burn for as long as there were people willing to choose love over fear, protection over profit, and family over everything else. The universe was vast and often cold, but it was also full of second chances. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, those second chances came with people who would never let you face the darkness alone again. In the end, that was the true measure of humanity's greatness, not their technology or their weapons, but their unlimited capacity to expand the definition of family to include anyone who needed one. And in a galaxy full of wonders and terrors, that might just be the most wonderful thing of all.